This is the DLR Cast, the essential podcast for fans of Diamond David Lee Roth. All right, welcome once again. We are back here at the DLR Cast, the podcast by and for fans of David Lee Roth by two fans, but not fanboys of Diamond Dave. I'm Steve, along with, as always, my good friend, Darren Paltrowitz. Darren, how are you?
Yeah, no, fabulous. Yourself there, Steve.
I'm fantastic, but I'm getting better. So
yeah.
We got another cool interview here. We had the pleasure of talking with a very cool podcaster and big rock fan, among many other things, Chuck Shute of the Chuck Shute Podcast. We talked about all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, we delved into him as an interviewer, a very prolific interviewer that's spoken to a lot of people that I've spoken to. Also, a couple people have been on the DLR Cast before. His history with Van Halen and David Lee Roth, whether or not he's the closest he's gotten to interviewing a Van Halen member, some of that and a lot more. Almost an hour chat with him.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. He has talked to most of his interviews are really cool rockers, from Dee Snider to Donnie V and Chips Enough from Enough's Enough to, he's interviewed a ton of people. It was just a couple off the top of my head, to the most recent interview with David Duchovny. He covers more than just the rock ground, but really super cool guy to talk to. I had a lot of fun. His podcast is definitely a lot of fun. So that's coming up in a second. But first, a couple bits of news and some David Lee Roth DLR band, Eat 'em and Smile band sightings, or a Skyscraper band sighting. I'm listening to Mark Maron's WTF podcast, where the most recent one with Lindsey Buckingham as a guest. And as a Fleetwood Mac fan, I totally dug it. And as a Lindsey fan, I would totally dug it. But I'm listening to the end, and he's talking about who is in his band that he's hopefully going to get out some tour dates. I'm not sure how old this interview is, but it is the most recent WTF podcast. And he's talking about the band that he's put together for an upcoming solo tour. And all of a sudden on keyboards, Mr. Brett Tuggle.
Yeah, Brett Tuggle has extensive credits, yet not really on social media, not really out there promoting the fact that he's been working nonstop for 35 years.
True. And of course, also I know from being a fan and following them on Facebook, Billy Sheehan, 1/3 of the super cool super group, the Winery Dogs, with the incredible Richie Kotzen and Mike Portnoy, former Dream Theater drummer extraordinaire. Their band, the Winery Dogs, they got together a couple weeks ago somewhere in the mountains of California, it looked like, judging by Facebook, and laid down a whole bunch of new tracks for a new album. So we know what Billy Sheehan's been up to, and I know from just following him on Facebook that he's got some seminars, and I think he's going to be at the Super Cool Rock and Pod Expo coming up in Nashville, so he's there. Haven't had a chance to dig into what Steve Vai is up to at the moment. And as far as the namesake of this podcast, as usual, we don't know what the hell Dave is doing. Right now, it seems to be nothing, because he's not going out on the road for these revised makeup, or let's say the post-COVID extension of the Kiss End of the Road tour.
Yeah, in case you don't remember from a prior episode, the only reason that I know that he's not doing these Kiss dates is that on one of the message boards, I think it was the Roth Army one, somebody reached out to Dave's business manager, Jerry Leonard, and said, true or false, Dave is doing these dates. And the quote was, David Lee is not doing the dates. So there was never a statement. It's just you reached out to his accountant and you find out he's not doing the shows.
Why would there be a statement? And the whole thing is, too, if you remember when Dave was on that leg of the tour right before COVID shut everything down, he was in all the advertisements. He was part of all the announcements and all the billing, and he's not now. So just to assume if you're going to go see Kiss, you're not going to see Dave open up.
But something that you showed me was, if you Google something like David Lee Roth tour Kiss, it leads to a part of his website, a page that's not linked from the main part of the website, but it's still posted because it's never deleted. So if you click on the wrong thing, you actually see David Lee Roth's tour dates on the Kiss tour on his website.
Right.
Yeah.
We could have a ball speculating and creating false rumors about why Dave isn't on the tour, but we won't do that. However, I would think that it could be just possibly one of two reasons. One, Kiss said, this is it. We don't need an opening act. Why take any of the gate proceeds from us, right?
Yeah.
Pay guarantees, whatever it costs to have Dave out. Or Dave might have just said, fuck it, this COVID shit is crazy. I'm in a high risk category, even though I'm in fantastic shape. It's not worth it.
We don't know what it is. So we don't know what's happening there. We don't know what the cryptic tweets about coming soon and new material. Don't know what those are giving us.
Right.
We don't know, will there be a follow-up single to Giddy Up? Will there be another extensive interview like the Joe Rogan thing? We don't know anything.
I mean, think of it. What would be the next podcast Dave could show up in 98-degree weather wearing a full wool jumpsuit or whatever the hell he was wearing on Rogan a couple months back?
Definitely too soon for a Mark Maron return. My money, if we were to improvise a betting pool right now, I would say he would be on a Bill Simmons podcast of some magnitude.
Wow.
Because, he's one of the kings of podcasting. Bill Simmons seems like he'd be a big Van Halen fan to begin with. If it wasn't him, my second pick would be on that Dave Chappelle paid podcast thing, because Letterman did a surprise appearance on that.
I have not checked out the Dave Chappelle paid podcast, probably because you have to pay for it.
But. It's a podcast. Exactly. And then my third pick would be, you have to say, who is the most EDM-centric, influencer-tastic podcaster with the best numbers that you and I have never heard of? And it's going to be...
Exactly. I mean, remember, it just all kind of blends in, but was it last year when he did the sci-fi semi-animated digital graphic novel, right?
The Roth project.
Right. I mean, I know he talked about it, what little press there was, but that would have been a great opportunity for him to show up on some dystopian, some dystopian comic book sort of related podcast that is out there, right?
Yeah. Hey, maybe we should put in a bid to be his publicist and book him on the shows. How do you think that'll go over? We might stand as good of a chance as that happening. We might only stand a slightly better chance of making sure Dave knows that he's got an open invitation, of course, to show up here on the DLR Cast. If we even get in any questions edgewise, you can be sure they're going to be questions that aren't asked anywhere else. Yeah, and besides this great interview with Chuck, rest assured there are outgoing inquiries related to people who've played with Dave, people who are diehards of Dave, and peers of Dave. With us, that something is coming soon. You are going to get another episode within the next, 7 to 14 days. That we can promise, and we'll do our best not to have the same intro where we go, so he's not on tour with Kiss.
Right.
No new music until there is.
Hey, we've been on a good roll. Hey, guess what? I mean, we don't pay too much attention to anniversaries because Lord knows everyone else does, which gets a little bit tiring. But, and no offense on anybody else, it's always a good news point, I guess. But we just passed an anniversary, a year's worth of doing this show.
Yeah.
So happy anniversary there. There you go.
Yeah, they said it would never let. Well, no one said it like that. But
I gave about 30 seconds thought of trying to put together a very special anniversary best of episode, but after a year is kind of pretentious. It is the summertime, and that would take up too much freaking time. I mean, I'm rudimentary at best at this stuff.
I think you're a lot better than you are declaring yourself to be, but whatever it is still fun doing the show. The feedback we get is tremendous. An interview like Frank Meyer, that only happened because listeners of our show said, hey, you should talk to Frank Meyer. And those turned out to be some of our best episodes yet. So, hey, without you folks listening, there is no DLR Cast, arguably.
Absolutely. And we got a fun interview upcoming right after this with Chuck Shute of the Chuck Shute Podcast. And we should mention too, if you've got tips or info or Dave sightings or know somebody cool that would want to be on the podcast, reach out to us at the DLR Cast at outlook.com.
And if you don't, we're just going to have to do that special episode about Sonrisa Salvaje. So that's your incentive to keep giving us good leads and content.
Next up, a very special episode.
And then after that, you know what's coming next? The Steve talks about your filthy little mouth for 4 hours episode and the no big ting.
As I break down your Cheating Heart Cafe and No Big Ting, this is giving me a complex because I really do like that record. It's always been out of all of Dave's catalog. It's that one is just the one that was it's still kind of a bit of a mystery to me, just in sound and production, and it's just almost there. It just doesn't quite shift into overdrive as far as most of those songs, but I do love it. I mean, I listen to that one all the time. So stylistically, he took some chances, and I like that.
I was taking a ride back from Manhattan, had the headphones on. Big Train came on when I had everything on random. Went, you know what? That's a great song. Wait, that's on your filthy middle. Your filthy little. You know what? That's not a bad album. I need to just dig back.
Exactly. Everybody's got
is great.
Yep, everybody's got the monkey. The first 3 songs are like bam, bam, bam. I can remember, and you saw this in the Las Vegas show, and then when he went out on the road with Kiss, my jaw hit the floor when he did Big Train. I mean, to pull out some obscure to 99% of the people there, an obscure song from his catalog. Yeah. I mean, to pull that one out, why not Sensible Shoes? Why not Stand Up or something that maybe people would have a better chance of recognizing? But nope. He said, damn it, I love this song. We're going to do Big Train. And it works. It's a great live song.
It works. Still sounds great. And you don't hear that song go, man, holy 1994 Batman. You just go, no, cool Dave song.
Yeah. Sounds like a great song. And that's exactly what it is. So, all right. As always, great to see you, my friend. And thank you, everyone, for downloading and streaming and making this podcast as much fun as it is.
Yes. And if you like this episode, tell Chuck publicly that you love this episode. Because,
follow him on Facebook. He's on all the socials. Chuck Shute, Shute. It'll be in the show notes. There you go.
Otherwise, thanks for listening and looking forward to the next one. Steve and I are joined by a great interviewer, somebody I've been listening to for a long time.
Well, thank you.
His name is Chuck. Chuck, yes. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. Yeah, I just had a great interview yesterday, and I'm loving life right now. So it's a compliment that you listen. I listened to a few of your shows as well, and I liked what I heard.
Well, thank you. You're one of those people that if I were to look through all the episodes of your podcast and the dates, then we'd be like, oh, okay, Chuck and I spoke with that person that day. And that day, and that day, I look through it and I go, okay, well, that's Wendy's client. That's Amanda's client. I got to do that.
Oh, that's funny.
Where you
when they do these PR blitzes and then you're just like, it's like a cattle call sometimes. And so then you try to stand out and you're like, well, how do I stand out? This guy's doing like 20 interviews a day. Why is mine going to be better?
Yeah, so I look through it and I say, oh, Stephen Piercy. Okay, Chuck is also speaking with him. Okay, Tony Harnell. Chuck is also speaking with him and all that. So a thing that makes you different, though, is while I just named some people that are synonymous with the 80s and early 90s music scene, in your case, you also speak with athletes. You also speak with comics. You're all over the place. Do you also have the wrestling gene, or is that where you draw the line? You're not a wrestling guy.
I was never a big wrestling guy. I mean, I'll be honest, there's a couple that I've reached out to just because I think they're interesting people that have kind of had forays into other fields as well. But sure. My brother was really into wrestling. So, I heard him talk about, he was really into, like, when the Stone Cold Steve Austin era was going on, he was really into it then. So I remember seeing stuff back then and learning through him. And I definitely watched some of it. But yeah, the thing that annoyed me about that era, and then probably now too, is there was so much drama and talk. And not just, the elbow drops and the actual wrestling.
Darren and I joke around a lot that there's, and this is no secret, but there's always this incredible crossover to, between wrestling and rock and roll. And I always say we're the DLR Cast. We're huge fans of David Lee Roth. It all started for me with wrestling, really, because I saw guys in great shape flying through the air in tie-dye tights and stuff when I was a kid. And then I hit high school and here's David Lee Roth, right? And I'm just getting into music coming out of wrestling. And there's this connection in my head.
Yeah.
I mean, God forbid had I gotten in, if there was jam bands that were really big in the late to mid 80s. I don't have the early to mid 80s. I don't have the attention span anyway, but if I saw a bunch of guys staring at their shoes dressed in denim, we wouldn't be here today. So,
yeah, they were characters. They were larger than life, just like David Lee Roth. I mean,
exactly.
And just that voice like this, just really like it draws your attention for sure.
And same with Kiss and a lot of those bands and the glam bands. Kind of that evolution as you get older, right? You start with cartoons, then it was wrestling. For me, some people say it was cartoons and wrestling, just, late 70s, early 80s, the same time rock and roll was just totally blowing up, especially in metal. I know you have a lot of great interviews on your podcast with a lot of different metal guys. See John Corabi, who I absolutely love.
Yes.
Some other there. So to me, it was just this great, I keep saying evolution, but it kind of is all interconnected there. The big colors, the big sound, the big rock.
It's entertainment. Yeah, it's entertaining for sure.
Always smarter than people think, than, than the kind of just the mainstream people think. There's just, it's not a bunch of dummies on stage or in the ring, so to speak.
Have you ever seen that movie? I'm sure you guys saw The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke. Oh, that's a great movie.
I saw it for the 5th time, like about 3 weeks ago. Just, got nothing going on one night. I'm like, just popped in my head, like, oh yeah. And I'm always reminded because there's that scene where they're dancing around and round. And, his ring music was, oh God, I can't remember what it was.
The whole soundtrack is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
And
so
it's scored by Slash, which, keeps it all on the big.
It was? Oh, I don't think I knew that.
Now, Bruce Springsteen did the closing credits theme song, but I'm pretty darn sure that the guitar stuff, the Spanish guitar, acoustic kind of stuff, was Slash in The Wrestler. So you never know who has that wrestling overlap and who doesn't. I remember when David Lee Roth was on the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast 4 or 5 years ago. Roth does not fanboy out at anybody, but he made it apparent that he knew who Steve Austin was and that he was a fan.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then Chris Jericho, he has a podcast and he does metal as well. So that's another big crossover. I've listened to a lot of his episodes. He's got a great podcast.
Oh, he does. Yeah. He's brought up bands that I thought I may have been the only person. Well, no, you're not the only person, but these Canadian bands, different people. I'm like, oh God, yeah, I love Kick-Axe. I loved Helix. So whoever, because he's Canadian, and he would mention these shows that he went to go see. And I'm like, man, that never came to the States. I wish I saw it,
Good point.
Chuck, in your case, who was the first interview putting you on the spot? Who was the first person you interviewed?
The very first person I interviewed was a comedian, Anthony Davis, that I just thought he came to a local comedy club. And I had interviewed a couple other comedians on another show I did. And I was branching out and I was like, I'm going to start doing more, just interview show. And so that was the first one where I was like, I don't think this is good for my other show. This will be good for just an in-depth interview. And I don't think he had done a lot of interviews. And I think he kind of started off, just like, as my girlfriend says, like, I think he was kind of maybe almost like annoyed, like, here. And then like, he saw that I was serious and I had done research and I had, really prepped for this. And then he's like, wow, okay, this guy like is really trying to do a good interview. And so I think I won him over in the end of the interview. And then my second one after that was Marcus Scott, from the drummer of Trickster. And that was a bigger one. That was I was more intimidated and scared. I'm like, this guy's like a rock star, he's toured with Kiss and Scorpions and stuff, and he's and so that was a little more scary.
So you're one of the few people that's interviewed Gus Scott from Trickster and Steve Brown from Trickster. You've got in both camps.
And PJ Farley. I just haven't interviewed Pete. I don't know that he does interviews, but he lives in Phoenix, so same as me.
And whose band did PJ Farley from Trickster join within the last 6 months?
Chris Jericho's Fozzy.
He did. So you see, it all comes back to wrestling.
It all comes back. That's right.
All right. Good night.
But for you, don't feel worried about giving us the most cred or indie answer ever. But where did the Van Halen fandom start? Which era first hooked you into the group?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was a kid, obviously I grew up and probably heard the songs on the radio and just, Jump and all those kinds of things. But I didn't really get into rock until about 92. And so then I kind of went backwards. I feel like, I think I might've, maybe the, can we swear on this?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. The Fuck album. So there are 4 Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. I think that might've been one of the first ones that I got into with Van Halen. And then I kind of went backwards. And then I started getting into all this like 80s rock stuff after 92. And I was growing up in Seattle, by the way. So grunge, all my friends were into grunge. And I'm like doing these deep dives into the 80s rock with Trickster and Danger and all this stuff. But I remember getting the first like Van Halen 1. That was my first Roth album that I listened to. And even Eruption back in the 90s, it still blew. I was like, what the hell is this? Like, this is crazy. Even at that point where, that had kind of been copied so much since then, but it still blows me away. Even to this day, that guitar work is insane. That whole album is great. And then if you obviously watch David Lee Roth and the whole band perform, how amazing they, energetic, again, like the wrestling, just so into the show and so entertaining. Yeah.
So that's where it started. And then what's, as an interviewer, the closest that you ever got to a Van Halen member or like a 1 degree removed thing? Like, for example, do you have a Gary Cherone interview credit?
I do not. No. I mean, I would say, I've definitely had people that a lot of people on will tell me Van Halen stories. Like I remember Dave Fortman from Ugly Kid Joe. They toured with Van Halen. He's like, yeah, it was so weird. Like I go into the dressing room and Eddie Van Halen would be like playing songs on his guitar and his tighty whities. I was just like, what? That is just such a weird image. And he's like, come on in, man. Like he was so laid back. And so you hear those stories and it's like so cool. And then I would say probably the closest though is maybe Stephen Piercy, because Stephen Piercy was a neighbor of Eddie Van Halen. And so they would go over to each other's house a lot and stuff. And I think Eddie Van Halen, there's a story like it. I don't know if you read Stephen Piercy's book.
I did.
Yeah.
God, that was so great. It was so fast. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, it's similar to The Dirt. In some ways, it's like even crazier than The Dirt. But he said like Eddie Van Halen would come over to his house and be like, hey, can I hide this like liquor in your garage? Like I'm hiding it from my old lady and stuff. Like, wow, how surreal that must've been.
It's funny you mention that because we talk about this a lot, as far as peers and people who came up with Van Halen, and the Piercy book reminded me that, Ratt broke in 84, but they were gigging around the same places and were coming up the same time. Mm-hmm. Well, Piercy was in different bands and he knew, the same time Van Halen was. I mean, they were, they were a few years away from breaking. Same with like a George Lynch, you put these, and a lot of those folks were either influenced, saw them, or were a lot of times on the same bills with those guys. And it's just, I don't think a lot of people really know that until you start reading these sorts of books. I mean, it was a good reminder for me with Piercy. It was like, oh yeah, my God, the whole, the liquor thing, and partying with Roth and all that stuff.
I think his first introduction, he met Roth before Van Halen. He was more interested in Van Halen because Stephen Piercy, I know he's a singer rap, but I guess he started out as a guitar player. Yeah. And so he wanted to meet Van Halen and then Eddie, and then he met Roth first. And I think they smoked a joint together or something. Like that's kind of a cool story.
Yeah. So Piercy was around much before. He's not an 80s guy. That's what I'm trying to say. People peg Ratt as an 80s band, but he started in the 70s. And of course, Ratt did have success into the early 90s. And you can argue if a band is still touring the world, they're still successful. So he's one of those long-term guys. But George Lynch especially, I mean, not everybody realizes that George Lynch closely had he was close to being Ozzy's guitarist twice. I think that's talked about in that new book, Nothing But a Good Time.
Oh,
he was like the runner-up against Randy Rhoads the first time. Then he was the runner-up against Jake, or was he the runner-up against Brad Gillis?
I think it's crazy that I had Mark Torian from the Bullet Boys on, the singer of the Bullet Boys, but he was actually Ozzy's guitar player for like a week or something crazy like that. That's a weird one too. And
Mark Torian and the Bullet Boys were produced by Ted Templeman, who did the first, 6 albums. So it's just this orbit of people that even if you can't get a member of Van Halen in an interview, you could still get 1 degree removed and still they know everything that was going on.
Oh yeah, for sure. I feel like I could probably get Michael Anthony at some point. I think that I've seen him do other shows that I'm like, I think I'm as good as this show that he's doing. So, you just kind of have that thought that this is a possibility at some point in a few years, maybe.
Oh, not a few years. You get over to that hot sauce company right now and you talk to Mikey and then you tell us everything that you spoke about with. No,
have you interviewed him?
I have not interviewed him. I was supposed to interview Hagar a few times. I would say usually I don't come public with this kind of stuff, but I think I've been through 6 different publicists with Sammy Hagar of, yeah. You're going to talk to Sammy. We're going to make it happen. You're going to hear from us next week. And then it doesn't. I'm going to say there was 2 different tequila publicists, like a restaurant publicist.
Oh my God.
A personal publicist. So, some of these people you really do have to chase down and then calendar it for 3 months later and again and again and again. Gary Cherone, he, it's surprising for somebody who's been as successful as him, how open and willing he is to do interviews. Like he doesn't seem like he's that burned or afraid of doing interviews.
Yeah, no, it's funny. So talking about Sammy, like you're talking about the Sammy Hagar and the connections. This is a funny story. So I was in Reno, like, God, this was like, it had to have been like 12 years ago or something. And we go to his Cabo Wabo cantina. Mm-hmm. And so I jokingly asked the waitress, I'm like, oh, is Sammy working today? I'd love to chat with him. And they're like, no, but his son is here. Let me go get him. And I was like, oh no, I was just kidding. Like what? Like, and his son comes out, Aaron Hagar. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever talked with him or had any interactions, but man, he is a great storyteller. And we talked to him for like hours. He bought us all these shots and we closed down the restaurant with him. He was just telling us all these stories. And he's such an interesting guy because he doesn't drink at all. He like went the opposite, right? Like you rebel against your parents. So he's like he doesn't do any drugs or any booze, but really interesting guy, interesting storyteller. I don't know.
I never interviewed him, but there was an episode on Sammy's travel show on Access TV. I forget, Steve, do you remember what it was called? Sammy's show? It was like Sammy's travel.
Yes, I saw that.
Rock and roll road trip or something
on
like
Access
that.
Or something.
Yeah, I remember he brought Sammy did a thing from Reno or Lake Tahoe, wherever he was, and he brought his son there. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's his son? He looks younger than his son. but
yeah, because I think he probably dyes his hair and stuff, and his son just is like, I'm going gray, fuck it.
Yeah, and he seemed like a really nice guy. And I read Sammy's book. I know you did too, Steve. But I forgot about that first son. I'm used to hearing about the son from the second marriage who has a band who was supposed to open for Sammy's tour like 2 summers ago.
I was going to say what the Sammy thing. You guys just reminded me because I forgot about Aaron Hagar, because I know one of the many stories. This just came up because it was yet another Van Halen reunion anniversary. I think it was, right? 2004. You saw on a lot of website stuff. And I know one of the things when they broke up and they wanted to do more work or something, Sammy was like, hey, I just got I have a new baby, and it's like, wait a minute. Oh, well, hold, I mean, Sammy to me is like preternaturally young almost, right? But he's been kicking around forever too.
The closest I can come to the story that you just had, Chuck, was I was on this press trip in Cabo. And when you do these press trips, or at least pre-COVID, like they fly you out to a resort. Sometimes the city does, sometimes the resort does. And you have to have all these group meals. So if you're in a group of 10 to 15 people, you're inevitably going to sit with everybody at some point. And your small talk game has to be super good. Or if you offend somebody at that first meal, the rest of that trip is awkward. So I made a joke at the first meal at this Cabo resort about like, yeah, we're just here for Sammy Hagar. And then the fiance or the bride got a little quiet, and I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, yeah, her dad's Sammy's business partner in the Cabo Wabo canteen. Like, oh, okay. And I looked up and it was totally true. And then when you talk to everybody in Cabo, everyone loves Sammy. Like, you don't find one person that doesn't say, how much he's done for this area. It's just full of stories. I wonder if it's up there like that and up there in Reno too.
I'm sure. Yeah. Who doesn't like Sammy? I mean, even him and David Lee Roth toured together and they were kind of friends or whatever.
No.
Right or no? I know, but he threw some shade at David Lee Roth recently. I thought I saw something in the news like he said David Lee Roth doesn't look good or something like that.
Steve, did you see that interview? Was it?
Yeah, it was relatively recently. It was bizarre. He was like, I don't know. We talked about this. It was like, I don't even know the guy. And then the same breath, there was like, he seems like a real empty guy. He's a clown and it's just, it was all, if with at least once a year, there's some shade being thrown there. And I can't even remember, there's so many different anniversaries that websites and blogs come up with. I can't, it's the 33rd anniversary of their third record. It's like, what? And so but I know there was some Van Halen, some sort of that came up that why, or something where Sammy was in the news, right? Recently about talking about 6 weeks ago or something. There was a big quote about Dave that went everywhere. And clearly it didn't register fully with me, but my brain is kind of full anyway. But the dream was when I remember seeing that tour and all the announcements, like, holy shit, they're doing a press conference together, right? Because there again, that was kind of like wrestling, right? You had the two guys, who were feuding for years. And then all of a sudden they come together. And yet it was, Dave was pretty infamous for never coming out of his bus on that thing. Sammy would have been happy. Hey, come up on stage, and Michael was in his band. Yeah. And he never, as much as we love Dave, it's like, to me, it was always like, dude, come on, that would have been fucking great. I just go back and forth.
They never sang together on. I know
right, exactly.
It was. So there was never like a duet at the end or something crazy like that.
And you know what? If you work it out, it didn't have to be a Van Halen song. I don't know if I'd want them trading vocals on like Panama or Pound Cake or something, but a cool cover song that they both probably did back in the day, with the sad passing of Dusty Hill, ZZ Top's bassist. I saw the other day, a YouTube link of and the audio of it of Van Halen back in the day doing LaGrange.
Yeah, and that would have been cool.
It's killer. Go find it on YouTube. And just to hear Eddie's riffs in that opening, just perfect, just fantastic. And that, I guarantee you, Sammy sometime coming up probably did way back when that, those bands not only crossed paths back when, but Sammy was in Montrose. I guarantee you they could have gone, hey, you covered that, so did I. You know what I mean? It could have been a cool meeting of great rockers, but alas, it never happened and never will happen.
I think Sammy is a Billy Gibbons guy. They're in that 1 Degree from Matt Sorum world.
Yes.
Yeah, Kings of Chaos.
Yeah, Matt plays with Billy on his solo tours, his last album and stuff, his solo album. Yeah,
I think that's all there. But in the case of Sammy, that Rock and Roll Road Trip show had a lot of gigs where it was just Sammy bringing people on stage and doing duets with them. We saw Vince Neil once or twice. He brought up to do Girls with Vince Neil. He brought up Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon. And I think he was trying to get Eddie money, but Eddie was sick at the time, so he couldn't do that. But Sammy's no stranger of, hey, come on up here, I'll share the stage. So if anyone could guide Roth through it, it would be Sammy.
Yeah, no, that's I think so my brother, his wife's sister is married to the singer of Train. And so I see him occasionally. Wow. Yeah, and I think he did the same thing I think I saw a thing with Pat Monahan and Sammy Hagar, and they got up and sang something together. So yeah, he's a really good singer too. Could do old school Led Zeppelin. Amazing.
Yeah, there was something on YouTube about that's right. And it's a couple months ago, and I was like, whoa, that guy's got some pipes. I had no idea that they did it. There was a YouTube cover, Zeppelin cover out there. That was,
they did a whole album of I think the Led Zeppelin 2, and it's like spot on.
Yeah, well, hey, Jason Bonham was his drummer on and off the last 20 years, so I guess he had to have been a Zeppelin fan to begin with. Of course, Jason being a great drummer, but let's shift it back to Chuck here.
Okay.
So Chuck,
you just lost all your viewers. Shit.
Great interviewer yet again. Please listen to Chuck stuff. Please, et cetera. Shill. How much research do you have to do versus how much do you actually know outright? That I can't tell.
That is a great question. Yeah, I like, you look at a guy. I was just thinking about this today because I was thinking about Eddie Trunk, and I was thinking about how like he just knows all that shit. Like he that's what he studies for years and decades. And then he worked in the record business. Was it Napalm Records or one of those record companies? Megaforce. And that's like literally all he does is read all that shit and reads all the liner notes and stuff. I mean, there's some of that for me, but I have so many other interests. I mean, as you can see from my back wall, like sports and movies and TV and stuff. So I do know a lot, but if I'm interviewing a guest, I mean, I do a deep dive and I try to find out as much as I can about that guest. And especially if I can find more obscure things that people don't already know about or isn't like talked about a lot, I think that's more interesting. And then I just try to take the most interesting things. Like if I'm kind of shocked about it, then I know that my audience is, because I know I have a general idea about most of the people I interview at least. And so if I find something that surprises me, I know my audience will enjoy it as well.
Well, that's one of the things, and not to completely suck up here, but as I discovered your podcast the last couple of weeks when we scheduled this, first off, I mean, just the amount of artists you have on that I absolutely love, from you got half of one of my favorite bands in the world. Well, they're not really together anymore. Enough's Enough, between Chips and Johnny V. Anybody who thinks that if you think, they're a glam band, shut the fuck up, because they're an amazing power pop band.
Right.
Bar none. You got Jizzy Pearl, who I remember way back in the day working a love-hate record in my record business days, going, this is the greatest record of all. This should be huge. And unfortunately it wasn't. And then he sang with everybody. And so I've listened to a couple of the podcasts, and you got so many people, and it is readily apparent. And I've seen it in some of the reviews, man, you do your research. And I know that takes a lot of time, even if you know the subject matter. There's nothing worse for me than reading it. And I try not to do this, obviously, and I know Darren too, but how many times have you read an interview, you're all excited by maybe a favorite artist or whatever, and it's the questions that you have asked 100 times. Like, I'm a big Cheap Trick fan. If I see one more interview where Rick Nielsen's asked about how many guitars he has, I'm going to throw my laptop out the freaking window. You know what I mean? It's right. Like I mean, the research informs your questions, correct? I mean, you're going to think of something else and go, hey.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's just like, what do I want to know? Like, I want to make a show that I would want to listen to, because I think there's a lot of podcasts going out there and many are really good. But then there's some where I just go, sometimes I kind of think like, I think this person is just kind of trying to do like a meet and greet. And they're just like, you know what I mean? Like, which in a way, I think we all kind of are. Of course, we want to like talk to this like rock star or famous person, but you got to really try to make a good show that people want to listen to as well. You can't, just think of stuff off the top of your head. I try to like go in prepped. And then obviously if they bring something up that I wasn't aware of, then I want to, follow them down that rabbit hole.
Right. You don't want to go all Chris Farley and Saturday Night Live on them, right?
That's so funny you mentioned that. I literally just watched a clip of the Chris Farley show and the Jeff Daniels one. And oh God, that's so classic.
Remember that time when you remember that? That was cool.
Yeah. Right. He's just so likable in that though. It's like,
hilarious.
Oh yeah. Yeah. What you're saying about in defense of yours truly right here. Sometimes you do have to appease the publicist, ask a couple of the generic questions, like they feed you those questions, or you have to ask about the new album. And then after you get that 4 or 5 minutes out of the way, then you go to ask them about the Spanish version of Eat 'em and Smile, or whatever the equivalent is. I like to work some of that stuff in. So for example, if you're talking to Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick, you ask him about being in the scene in the Fat Boys movie Disorderlies. You try and work that in there and hope you don't get hung up on.
Yeah. Some strange left field thing like that, right?
Yeah. Or like, but something that's like, that's interesting, because he probably hasn't been in a lot of movies. So that's definitely, something that, and people love movies. So I think I didn't know that. I don't know if I've even seen that movie.
Have you ever seen that scene, Steve?
Oh God. Yeah. In fact, on kind of a related thing, it's amazing what comes up on YouTube, right? But today something popped up, and because the YouTube algorithms, like, this guy looks up a lot of Cheap Trick stuff and glam stuff and whatever, with the occasional, wrestling sidebar or some weird Rodney Dangerfield clip. And I won't even go down my YouTube watching rabbit hole. But what popped up was, do you remember the Drew Carey show when they were going to have a band? And in one scene, they're auditioning guitar players, and it starts with Slash, Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, Joey Ramone, Rick Nielsen, Johnny Lang is up there. Like, Johnny, we just wanted you to come over here to mow the lawn. He's like, And so they all play like a little riff. It's like, no, you're too, and Dave Mustaine like just throws all these riffs like, hey, you don't have to be nervous. Slow down, man. Right? And
that's
the final,
I haven't seen that clip. That's
just look up Drew Carey guitar. Well, I don't even know. It somehow it popped up. And then the one they pick is the last guy is Joe Walsh. And they're like, you got the gig. And it's just, I love seeing whenever you see, we always joke about this, like they're just like us, rock stars in different settings, right? It's kind of cool. And I would imagine asking about them might be the last thing they expect. Asking about those weird offstage sort of things might be the last thing they would expect.
Yeah. If I ever speak to Slash, I'm going to think about what are the most obscure things that he played on. I know the actor that played Malachi in Children of the Corn, Courtney Gaines. He and Matt Sorum played on some demo because of a friendship, a family friendship kind of thing. And so you have to imagine if he did that for that, there has to be a lot of, hey, Slash, would you play on this? And it didn't get it added into All Music Guide or Wikipedia. So I think sometimes you need that YouTube wormhole to find stuff. Like Chuck, we've talked about in recent weeks, more and more David Lee Roth stuff pops up, like him with the college marching band. When was that, Steve? Was that like 85?
Yeah, like it's 84, 84. I think he was still in Van Halen, right? Maybe 84, 85, somewhere on there. And he popped up in like the Midwest somewhere. Was the University of Kansas or something like that? With like the college marching band, this packed stadium. And it's just like, what the hell? I had no idea.
Well, didn't he do an album with John 5 that was never released?
Yes, he did. As a matter of fact, yeah, that's where two of the most recent songs that just popped up out of nowhere. That Sunset Bar and Grill song that was kind of a tribute to Eddie, even though it was written ages before, that he put on the website after Eddie died. Yeah, and it was on Spotify and everything else. And then this most recent, was it Giddy Up? I think it was called. Yeah, and it sounds very. It's not a rock. It's not a hard rock record, but that's been in the can for a long time. And of course, it's always a mystery as far as what he's going to do next. I mean, the time of this podcast comes out, Dave might not do anything, might put up 3 pieces of artwork or this album. Who the hell knows? I mean,
is there any other artist you can really say that about? I'm putting you both on the spot here. We know, okay, it's another calendar year. We're going to get another Cheap Trick studio album. We know certain artists, this is what they're going to do. And is there any artist besides Dave in the classic rock realm that you don't know what they're going to do next or when they're going to do it?
That's tough. That's probably tough to come up with because everybody else has got publicists galore and kind of, there's some sort of ramp up. There's a lead in, right? There's a single before an album. There's all of a sudden a bunch of interviews, all of a sudden, all around. I mean, whether somebody's written a book or there's a new barbecue sauce or whatever, even if it's non-musical stuff. With Dave, all of a sudden it's just like ink the original tattoo. Holy shit, he's everywhere. And then it just completely disappears. It's like, it's just everything is kind of, that's interesting marketing, I guess, for lack of marketing, right? Just surprise.
Yeah, I'm curious about Guns N' Roses. If
there you go.
That camp is so quiet. I mean, you hear that they're working on music I've been hearing that for years. And the other band before they reunited, the old band had heard, things that Axl was playing with them and they were blown away. Like he just would, play some crazy thing on the piano and they're like, oh my God. And it's just something I'm working on fiddling with or whatever. And so I'm sure there's music that Axl has written, but when and if it will ever get released, I mean, that's a total mystery.
I would say maybe AC/DC is another one. That camp is notoriously tight, right? I mean, it was only thanks to like paparazzi spy photos of like Brian Johnson and Phil Rudd smoking a cigarette at a studio in,
Vancouver,
Canada. Yeah, Vancouver, where they were recording what ended up being the record that came out last fall. It's like, holy shit, they're back. What? Brian Johnson's back, and that just, and they wouldn't confirm or deny anything. And all of a sudden, back when last October, out of nowhere, there's just a little 30-second teaser video. Not even. It's like with that guitar, it's like, okay, here it comes. Get ready. There was no other announcements or nothing.
They didn't need to. They don't need to. They just we're their AC/DC. Like, here you go. Like, I mean, they could literally just put out a pile of shit and people would be like, oh my God, it's AC/DC shit. I got to buy it. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah. And I don't think, if I've read correctly, AC/DC doesn't have a manager or a publicist. They have technically somebody administrating the publishing. They have a lawyer, and otherwise you don't hear back, which I would say is the same thing as DLR, where the rumor about him not playing this upcoming Kiss tour was only confirmed because somebody reached out to his accountant / business manager and said, is this true? And he went, no. You couldn't get the information anywhere. So it's really, I think you're right. It's Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, and David Lee Roth are the three most puzzling artists that we don't know if and when we're getting anything new.
And before that, let's face it, Van Halen was the same way, right? I mean, really, you knew nothing what was going on in that camp. I mean, all of a sudden who heard the rumors? And this was still 2007, so there was the internet, but really, who heard the rumors that you'd been hearing off and on for ages that Dave was back in the band, right? But slowly things would creep out. I mean, I'm sure everybody in those camps have to sign non-disclosure forms. What you saw and see here is not going anywhere, But Van Halen was another one like that, where it's just they're always working on music. That's all we know.
I remember hearing very clearly from a guy who was a marketing manager at a label in 2001 that the reunion was happening. I'm wondering if the 2001 Roth Van Halen reunion rumors that I heard were because of that recording session they did in 2000.
Possibly.
Yeah. So, well, I guess we have to figure out who would be the one person that David Lee Roth vents to, that vents to another person, that vents to another person. And then that's how we're going to find everything out.
Don't you love unraveling mysteries?
Best friend is.
Isn't their music still recorded with Roth and Van Halen that's in the vault somewhere?
Yes. I mean, there's a book that's coming out very soon, I think, through Permuted Press. I was telling you about this off air, Steve. It's called, I think, Fire in the Canyon. We're going to hopefully have the author on very soon. And he had access to 5150 in the 2000s for the last tour with Sammy, that era. And then I think the beginning of the reunion with Roth. And there were some photos of the master tapes on the walls, and we've always been hearing they don't know what's in the vaults, and everything is clearly tape labeled on these things. So I don't know if we'll be able to figure out more spoilers from that, but it really does look like everything was cataloged. They're just playing a little coy.
That'd be interesting if they had done anything before he left for the 5150, like with Roth. That would be kind of cool to hear that.
Aren't you of the belief, Steve, that before he left Van Halen, that even most of the songs in 1984 were written before the first album record deal was signed?
Well, so much of their output on that first 6 albums were from those original, even bits and pieces here. I mean, I'm sure we'll easily be corrected, but I think, Panama was written for, was relatively new, not from that original, those legendary demos. Wait, possibly. So, the more keyboard stuff, Jump, which, Eddie started noodling with keyboards in like 83 or whatever, 82, and was, wrote new music, was real inspired new music because of that. I mean, what we saw with Different Kind of Truth is half that album was some stuff that was repurposed, kind of reimagined, if you will. Dave gets involved in it, and was a lot of that stuff was made brand new again, even though some of that stuff went back 10, 15 years at least. At least. So let's shift it back to Chuck here. Chuck.
Okay.
Are you allowed to talk about what interviews or what's next for you? Or are you all under NDAs as a big time podcast?
NDAs? No, I don't have a lot set up right now. I'm actually leaving. Are you guys going to the Rockin' Pod thing in Nashville?
I wish. Every year it's like right when I'm out of town on vacation. It's that thing has really grown. Chris Cisnak and Aaron Camaro, right? I think started that a couple of years ago. Those guys, I love their podcast. Those guys are great guys, and that thing has just grown, man. This year it's I don't think they didn't do it last year. I don't think because of COVID. But,
right? Yeah, I was gonna go last year, so it's like, it's a year in the making for me. I was really excited last year. I was thinking about going, and then this year I was like, I gotta go. And I just wasn't sure about planes. So I'm like, I'm just going to drive. And so I'm hoping my car's been in the shop for like 3.5 months, but I'm hoping to get it back today. And I'm doing this big, massive road trip. So I'm going to be off for like 2 weeks. So I'm going to try to set some things up while I'm traveling. And so then I'll come back and hopefully have just like a couple weeks or even months worth of guests. And thankfully I interviewed this massive like TV star yesterday. So that's going to be when any publicist goes to my page, they'll see that guy's name as the last guest that I interviewed. So I'm hoping to use that as kind of a springboard. And I find that so ironic that was like one of the easiest guests I've ever gotten, believe it or not. Like I just, somebody reached out. I saw that he was on another friend's podcast and I said, that's awesome. And that guy messaged me and said, here you go, send him an email. And so I did. And they got back to me like a week later and said, can you do this date? And I had 3 interviews this week and I was like, yes, I can. I'll squeeze it on the same day. And I made it work. And so, yeah, it's just funny that like David Duchovny will do my show, but like there's so many these, more even obscure hairband musicians that totally blow me off. And so I find that funny.
Yeah. So I had the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Duchovny early into the pandemic. I think it's the same publicist, initials ET.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. She's great.
Yeah. And really nice.
Really nice. And then Duchovny's so pleasant. As long as you talk music. I don't think you veer into the acting, then it changes. But
I started off with the acting actually, and then I veered into the music. And he was pleasant the whole time. He just seemed really, because I was really nervous. I'm like, oh, I hope I don't piss him off. And it was one of the easiest interviews I ever did, because you see why he's such a big star, because he's so likable and he's so charismatic and so funny. And he's the only one out of 160 some interviews. He's the only one that's like asking stuff about my wall, like one of the few that's like, oh, what do you got up there? Oh, you're interested in Muhammad Ali and Star Wars. I'm like, wow, he's like interested in me. I'm like, what? Like, I'm boring. Let's talk about you.
He'd been to my town. He knew stuff, which is really incredible. And it's funny what you just said, which is one of the things that I find over and over and over again, which is somebody super famous like him would be like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And then I can't think of how many times I've been promised Mark Slaughter and then had him pulled on me.
Yeah, I haven't even been, I can't even get a response on that one. I've sent several emails, and there's a lot of that ilk that will, that I don't want to mention my name, but yeah, I mean, there's some that are, I mean, probably nobody knows who they are except me and, maybe a few hundred or 1,000 people, and they won't return my calls. What do you do?
Yeah, you just take, you don't take no for an answer, and you follow up and you follow up. And that's how you wind up with a great podcast like yours. Now, are there any causes or things that we didn't plug that we should about you, Chuck?
No, just if people could subscribe to my YouTube channel, that's what I'm really trying to push right now. I'm really trying to get 1,000 subscribers. I just hit the 500 mark, which may not seem like a lot to some people. I don't know. I mean, I started with like 10. So it's like, it's taken a while, but it's like, it's growing steady. I'm getting like 50 or 60 new subscribers every month, but I really want to get to that 1,000, because I think at 1,000, you can sort of monetize it. I mean, it's probably pennies, but it's something. So that's kind of my next goal, is to get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. But if you want to listen on Spotify or Apple, or I'm on like literally all the podcast formats. So
I'm going to validate what you just said. If 500 people is a lot or not, think about it. If there was 500 enemies in your life, you had to walk around being like, I hope these 500 people aren't there. It's kind of a lot of people. So just sometimes you need to rationalize how many 500 is. People are like, it only sold 500 tickets to the concert. Like, that's 500 people. That is a mob of people.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I'm very grateful for any subscribers, or the fact that anybody wants to listen to my show. And obviously I know they're not listening for me, they're listening for the guests, but I hope that I steer the conversation in an interesting way so that it's, enjoyable for them.
And Steve, I'm going to give the floor to you, because I've been hogging that spotlight.
No,
because I'm going solo.
I was going to ask, because I mean, just as an erstwhile podcaster and someone who loves doing interviews, I mean, I just love hearing you guys talk about this conversation. But Chuck, if there was like, it could be from any, it could be music, wrestling, whoever, music, movies. But if you had 3 people that you would, the 3 top people that you would, the dream interviews for you, who would they be?
That's a great question. I love it. Definitely Axl Rose is definitely would be amazing. Or even Izzy Stradlin would be pretty amazing. Yeah. I'm a big Guns N' Roses guy. Both of those guys. I mean, Slash would be interesting too, but you can hear interviews with him, but Axl and Izzy, I mean, you just don't hear a lot from them. And while Izzy is probably really introverted, so I don't know how good of an interview, he might not want to talk a lot, but I think Axl, if you could get him to open up, I think it'd be an amazing interview. So that's definitely one. Sebastian Bach too, just because I'm a huge Skid Row fan. And God, how easy of an interview that would be, because he's so entertaining. You just say, right. All right, go, and just let him take over the interview, and it'll be amazing. And then probably, I was just talking to my girlfriend today, like someone from Seinfeld. I'm a big Seinfeld fan, or even here. Like Larry David from Curb Your Enthusiasm, who Seinfeld creator. I mean, that would be amazing too.
Well, Sebastian Bach is now doing press, so that one may not be hard to get in the very near future.
Is he?
Slave to the Grind 30 tour. I'll forward you the press release.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that there was a press release. I didn't know he was doing interviews though.
I think as long as you agree not to ask him when there'll be a classic reunion lineup of Skid Row, I think he'll talk to you.
I mean, yeah. How do you not get his recent thoughts on that? But I guess if he's already answered that question 10 times, again, that's why I do the research, because like I knew with David Duchovny, don't ask him if he believes in aliens, because he's been asked that question a million times and he's sick of it. Like I saw one interview where he just goes, I'm not going to answer that. He's like, I've answered that 500,000 times. And he's like, well, what was the answer? Yes or no? And he's like, it depends.
Yeah. 90% of the time, those would be the questions I would not, I wouldn't ask on my own, it's like, because I know it's tiresome. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm tired of hearing tired of hearing the question, I am, and I'm interviewing.
Right. Exactly.
I love the Duchovny interviews he did in the early 2000s on Howard Stern. Those are just unbelievable. It's not just the how much money you do make kind of thing. You actually see Duchovny trying to get a planned dinner or hang out with Howard Stern, and Howard Stern just keep backing away from it. He's like, you would never hang out. No, Howard, I'm asking you to hang out. Well, I just got the vibe that David Duchovny, after speaking with him, he really defies all the things that you would think about a big star like him. He seems like a real person. And part of that has to be that he didn't make it until he was, say, 30, 35 years old. So I find that sometimes the people who made it a little later are just the greatest. But Steve, I stole the spotlight again. Back to you.
No, I mean, was super curious. Well, I think we got 2 or 3 there, right? So
yeah, there's another one, Howard Stern. I'd love to interview him. I'd even love to interview him off air. If I could have like 20 minutes to pick his brain about what he does and techniques and strategies and tips. Oh my God, I feel like that'd be so valuable.
And then you'd have to ask him about loving enough's enough and then denying it years later, right?
Yeah, well, does he deny it? He doesn't deny. He just raved about Donnie V just a few, but he makes fun of it too. He's like, yeah, Donnie V. He's like, what a great singer this guy is. Of course, now he's probably working in a fast food restaurant or something.
Right.
Like, I think that's just like his shtick. He's got to be silly and stuff. But no, I think he still loves it. Did he deny it?
I think that anything that Howard Stern did before 2008 is kind of, that never happened. And 2008 forward, Howard Stern loves Train and Maroon 5 more than anyone, it seems.
Would that roughly coincide with him going to satellite radio?
Part of the satellite radio, part of a lot of the people from the show being gone, like Artie Lang.
Oh yeah.
Well, also he's just older now. Like,
yeah,
I find myself enjoying old man music now. Like I love that kind of like jazz, and I still love the hair metal and stuff too, and even the heavier stuff. I'm still discovering. I just interviewed the guy from Exhorder, and I was like, how have I never heard of this band? They sound like Pantera, and people say Pantera ripped these guys off, but this band is amazing. So
I didn't know them. Did you know them, Steve? Exhorder?
No.
Are you guys? Do you like Pantera at all?
Some of the stuff. It was a little. I was always much more into the more melodic stuff back then, and still now. I mean, I was just gonna mention, and you interview a lot of these guys. For me, and I say this all the time, I'm far more interested in hearing the new music by my favorite bands. Like, I'm a huge Night Ranger fan. They got a new album coming out. I think one of the best albums they ever did was their record previous to this, whose title I'm spacing on because I might be going through early dementia, but and so like, I'm more excited to, I love the catalog. It's where, it's how our favorite bands got to be where they are now. But
right.
I'm way more excited to hear something new from, say, a Cheap Trick, or even, I was so excited for the last Black Sabbath record, right? Or the last Oz. I want to know what my favorite artists are doing now, or what, the newer stuff. I've heard the hits a million times, and I love discovering stuff I haven't heard before. But, these guys are trying so hard to get noticed with their new music for good reason, because most of the time it's really good. They're still creative. They love doing what they're doing, but it's harder than ever. I mean, there's no rock radio anymore. It's such a crowded landscape, and everybody is just like, play the hits. So
no, I see. And that's why, you're a true music fan. Cause I'm the same way. I'm like, I want new music. Like I want some, I've heard this stuff so much, and it's good, of course, but it's like, you've heard it a million times. You want something new and fresh. And a lot of the bands that make new and fresh, I mean, like Donnie V, we talk about Donnie V.
There's another one. He's got new music.
His
coming,
new
right?
record is amazing. I mean, it's so melodic, and it's poppier than probably some of the past Enough's Enough stuff, but I love it. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, for those guys, if I'm interviewing any of those guys, let's say I got 30 minutes, about 24 and a half of them is going to be talking all about their new stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow. Because they must love you then.
Well, but I'm a fan, but I'm super curious too, because so I'll devour. That's one of the great things about the time, one of the really great things about the times we're living in now is that, when those guys are out doing stuff, there's more places than ever before. There are podcasts like yours, and old, and different blogs and websites and all this stuff out there, where before, years ago it was like, you hoped for maybe, some press coverage. You hoped, I mean, I'm older than you guys, but I'm like, yes, it's in Kerrang, you know what I mean? And you had to wait for it. Or
I remember those days, like in metal, because like I said, I started getting into this music in the 90s, and so all those rock magazines like Circus and Rip and all that, like you'd hope for some sort of blurb about your favorite band, and a lot of times like they didn't cover that genre during the 90s at all. Like there'd be issued by an episode or issue of Hit Parader, and there would just be completely all about grunge. There was nothing about metal or hair metal.
Yeah. It's still rock and roll to me, to quote some old dude from Long Island. I can't remember. So,
but Billy Joel, who also is no stranger to bringing people on stage for duets. You got to remember, in the years when Brian Johnson was kind of cast out of AC/DC, he went on stage with Billy Joel to do. Did he do Back in Black and You Shook Me All Night Long, or did he just?
I thought it was just You Shook Me All Night Long.
So Billy Joel likes AC/DC. Vince McMahon supposedly plays AC/DC on loop all day on the WWE corporate jet. That I've heard that.
Oh man, to be on that thing, that would be a fun trip. Vince McMahon's an interesting guy. Even if I'm not a huge wrestling fan, but Vince McMahon, man, just an interesting person, the way he built that thing up. And
completely. Yeah. I mean, what he did, and the fact that it's had such staying power. I mean, Darren's a consummate wrestling fan here, and the fact to me is that it's still just so hugely popular.
Yeah, I have friends that they pay for the pay-per-views or whatever.
Well, that business model actually changed. Not to get too deep on you, WWE did a thing where they made it where if you pay the $10 a month or so for their network, it includes all the pay-per-views in there every month. So it went from being the pay-per-views are $60 a piece, $50 a piece, to it's included in the 10 along with the whole library. But the number two company, which has some roots to Minnesota. I think some of their business dealings, Steve, happened because of Minnesota happenings. This company's based in Jacksonville. They're like $60 pay-per-view, $50, that kind of a thing. And people are buying it. They're getting six figures of buys per pay-per-view.
So who are the big like wrestlers right now? Because I don't know. I'm just curious if I've even heard of them. Like who are like the top 5 like biggest wrestlers that are wrestling right now?
in that company, Chris
or just
Jericho,
in general?
Chris Jericho is
He's still going?
He is 51 and still wrestling almost every week.
Wow.
And he brings a lot of the newer talent in. I guess you could equate it to if Stephen Piercy said, I'm going to do a duets album and we're going to get Greta Van Fleet and we're going to do this and this and this. Maybe a better example would be he's the Carlos Santana Supernatural era.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So Jericho's working with a lot of the younger people and making, he's getting a little bit of a shine from them. But at the same time, I guess he's great and he could do whatever he wants. So he's one of the top guys. Who else is big? John Moxley. He used to be named Dean Ambrose in the WWE. And he's a big fan of Kiss Animalize Live, the MTV concert, which I've watched many times. Have you watched that, Steve?
Not in a very long time, but I remember that. I think that was an MTV broadcast back in the day.
Yeah, it was like 84, 85.
Yep.
Weird non-makeup Kiss where all the songs are played at like double the speed, which pisses Gene Simmons off.
And contained one of Gene's best wigs also. So the animalized wig leather headband hold it in place look. So.
Yeah, because he was filming that Tom Selleck and Kirstie Alley movie, that Runaway.
With the robot spiders or something like that.
Yeah, when you shoot a gun, the bullet is smart. It's a smart bullet, and there's robot spiders. And
what? I gotta see this movie.
Chuck's looking at us.
I haven't seen this one. When you said Kirstie Alley and Tom Selleck, for some reason I was thinking 3 Men and a Baby, and I was like, wait, no. I combined Look Who's Talking with 3 Men and a Baby.
But that's not even the weirdest Gene Simmons movie. Do you know which one I'm talking about? It's from like 86, 87, Steve. It stars John Stamos. I think young George Clooney is in it.
Yeah, and he's a transvestite, right?
Gene Simmons is
okay, now you guys are just fucking with me. Is this
no,
real?
No.
He's kind of a multi-gender lounge singer bad guy that's trying to get with John Stamos romantically. It's called something like Dead or Alive or something like that.
What do you think the pitch meeting was like for that movie? Okay, hear me out.
When I think of a beautiful person that can encompass all genders and loves, it would be Gene Simmons. Yes, that's what it would
Never Too Young to Die. And I found that by literally looking up Gene Simmons transvestite.
And to go full circle, David Duchovny played a transvestite on Twin Peaks, one of his first roles ever.
Damn.
Did he?
Yeah. Like 92. It's really progressive.
And how much of your interview did you spend asking him about that?
Oh man, I couldn't hit on that. If I would have had like an hour, that might have made the cut. I mean, I had a list of questions a mile long, and I was like, all right, I just got to take the best ones and squeeze this into 25 minutes or whatever he gave me.
I got to say, what I learned from talking to Duchovny, I figured this out early into the interview. He didn't start playing guitar until he was like 30 or 35. I think
like 50, 54.
54. Wow. Oh, okay. Well, I remember hearing that he got the show creator of Californication to like pay for guitor lessons.
Yep.
Be good for
I asked him about that. That was really smart. And then because I was like, he's like, yeah, old habits die hard, because I didn't want to pay for it. I'm like, but can't you afford it? Yeah. So
genius. Well, that kind of gives hope that whoever our favorite actors are, they might pick up guitar in their 50s and make solo albums. So I guess that Dane Cook solo album will have to happen.
Dane Cook. Whatever happened to him? I haven't seen him performing lately. I'm sure he's still touring and stuff, but he used to make all those movies.
He did, I think his name was fresh in my mind because I was reading about Steel Panther last night. And one time I saw Steel Panther before they were a major label band, and they brought out Dane Cook on stage, and he did Smooth Up Inya, and I think he did Panama, and he was good.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Or maybe did Running with the Devil, not Panama. Whatever it is, I didn't know he could sing or at least mimic.
I didn't know that either. Yeah, I've seen Steel Panther like, I don't know, 30 or 40. I think my girlfriend's so sick of it. She's like, really? You have to see them again? Like every time we go to Vegas, they used to play at House of Blues on every Saturday. I think it used to be free, and then it was like $20, and then but yeah, I mean, every time you see them, it's like a different show. They play their originals, but especially in the earlier days, they do a lot of covers, and they'd like change the words up a little. It was so fun.
Steve, did you ever see Steel Panther?
No, never did. I mean, I've seen them on video and stuff like that, and they're obviously talented, really good. I know people are fans, and my whole thing is like, and I totally dig parody and totally dig all that stuff, but I've never been a big tribute band guy. I've never been cover band in a bar. Fine. I love cover versions anyway. If you're going to do something different, have fun with it. But, I'm going to go for the real thing, so.
But it's the shtick between the guitar player and
that's
the singer.
What I heard. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like stand up. And like I said, every time it's different though. They don't do the same jokes. I don't know if they make it up or they run it by, they do a script before each show, but almost every time it's different and it's always hilarious.
Yeah, agreed. One of my favorite live bands to see. Well, Chuck, you have been a delight. Do people even say delight anymore? Or is that just an Adam Carolla thing that's making fun of other hosts?
I don't know, but I'll take it. Thank you. I'll take it as a compliment. Yeah. I love being a delight. You guys have been delightful as well.
We aim to delight.
Be sure to check out the Chuck Shute podcast because you will not be disappointed.
There's something on there for everybody. I think
there really is. So that's kind of the type of podcast I've always aspired to outside of the DLR Cast, and I've really loved because the odds are good. I'm going to be, even if I'm not sure who the person is, I'm going to find something interesting about that person through your interview, And
that's the goal. Yeah. I appreciate it.
The good thing is that, most of these guys I do know or know of. So I love I always loved your, I can't remember it now, your tagline. It was educate, inform, inspire, or something like that. Forgive me for mangling
I just threw that up there because I was in some podcast group and somebody said like, what's the point of your podcast? And I was like, that's a good question. I was like, maybe I should think about that. And I was like, well, I think I try to educate people, inspire, and God, what is the third one? Inform. Now I'm drawing a blank. Educate, inspire, and entertain.
Delight.
Entertain, of course.
You gotta be, if it's not entertaining, then I don't want to bore people to death. So it's entertaining.
What are we doing here?
And sometimes, I lean heavier on the education or entertaining. So, but I think that's the goal. Like, and sometimes it's the inspiration too, that like, I like hearing these stories. Like, it's really inspirational to me to hear how hard these guys work to make it. They're not just born a rock star. They had to grind and have these cool stories where they're, going through this rough time and then they make it. And that's like so cool to me. I love those stories.
Right on. And so you're on all the podcast providers and we can find you on YouTube. You got a Facebook page.
Yep.
You're easy to find and easy.
I'm even
to
on TikTok. I mean, that's how I really branched out. I don't post a lot on there, but I'm on there.
You're everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
I try to be.
Can't top that. Chuck, we will look forward to your future interviews with CJ Snare and
he blew me off, damn it. I sent him a message and he goes, "Oh, thanks for thinking of me. Hit me up on this date or something." And I go, "Okay." And I put it in my calendar, and I message him and then nothing. So I think he had some health issues though recently too. And so they're on tour. So, I mean, it happens. People get busy, but yeah, I think I'll get him on at some point.
Whatever it is, we're listening. Thank you for your time and we'll keep checking in, right?
Thank you.
No sign off, Steve.
What's that?
No sign off. Nothing but
educate, entertain, and inspire. There you go.
There we did. We got it.
The delight.
Thank you. You guys have been delightful.
Thanks, Chuck. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.